Welcome, everybody, to the panel discussion for Heat Exchange, Art and Infrastructure from the Tropics to the Arctic. It's a reciprocal residency program being developed by Bas Fisher Invitational Miami and the Rogaland Kunstsenter in Stavanger, Norway. I'm just going to give a quick intro to how we're going to format the talk. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement, then I'm going to describe the program a little bit, and then I'm going to introduce the artists with bios, followed by a casual yet very in-depth, wild, interesting conversation between all of us. So, and also I want to say that we are just coming from an altar making workshop by Lonnie Johnson, which is still going on in the back of the room. So please continue to make your altars, and if anyone hasn't yet, I hope you stick around and take your hand in it. So, Bas Fisher Invitational is an artist-run presenting organization that produces site-specific projects across Miami-Dade County. In doing so, we're always full of gratitude for being able to present programming on the ancestral lands of the Tequesta and Taino people, currently stewarded by the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, the Seminole Tribe of Florida, and the original Miccosukee Simonole Nation of Aboriginal people, among others. The residency program we will be discussing today is focused on creating an exchange between artists in Miami and Norway. Through this work, we are engaged in conversations around how settlers and the governments they established can better support indigenous sovereignty and how indigenous communities in both regions are facing distinct but similar threats to their traditional ways of life. Globally, at least a quarter of the world's land area is owned, managed, used, or occupied by indigenous peoples and local communities. Indigenous communities are maintaining the vibrancy of the ecosystems they know through intergenerational knowledge, while also finding themselves on the front lines of climate change and habitat degradation. Intersectional environmental practice necessitates that we support their work, listen to their teachings, and honor their foundational contributions to the movement. We are grateful to be learning today with Reverend Houston R. Cypress of the Otter Clan of the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida. We are also grateful for Marit Anasara's continued involvement in this exchange. Marit is a Sami artist based in Sápmi who is representing Norway at the Venice Biennial next year, where the Nordic Pavilion will be renamed as the Sápmi Pavilion. We'd like to end by noting that a land acknowledgement is just the beginning, opening the door for concrete actions in support of our indigenous neighbors. So with that as the... Oh, yes, thank you. Please clap. So with that as the very core anchor of what we're doing, I just want to introduce this program as a seed that was planted starting in 2014 when I first did a residency as an artist at the Rogaland Kunstsenter, where I first had the honor to meet Siri. And through another residency we did together in Lofoten, we've really developed the seeds of this program and together worked very hard to make this happen. So I really want to just give a big special thank you to Siri.
Thank you.
And the conversations that developed were really about both how different and how the same our arts ecosystems are. I think I, as an artist and someone who just sort of understood that there was a lot of different kind of support, whether it's for parental leave in Scandinavia versus how it is in America, that kind of social democratic safety nets also exist for the arts. And really spending time in Norway made me understand better how that happened. For one, Norway is very fortunate to have a small population, to have discovered oil, and where their government was wise enough to tax it. But even more so, they had a very strong artist unions even prior to discovering oil. So when there was more money for better social programs, artists were able to really strongly advocate for it. And as an American wishing for more social safety nets, and as an artist who runs an artist-run alternative art space, I'm really intrigued with ways that how we as artists can band together as a community and collectively find ways to make change for good. I was so thrilled at the things I've learned in my time in Norway that in developing this program, I worked to select 3 artists from Miami who aren't just artists, but really vocal advocates for their communities, activists, and people who I thought through integration into this other way of thinking, governing, arts making, arts advocacy would find seeds to help anchor their own practice and help us all make better change in our respective communities. So with that, I'm going to read people's bios. I'm going to try to maybe skim through it a little bit just because everybody has done so much. Everyone deserves like 3 panels just on their own work. So I'll start with Siri. Siri Borge is based in Stavanger, a city on the west coast of Norway. Borge is a multimedia artist using sculpture, installations, performance, photo, and film. As a maximalist, she prefers to use all at once. Her art can be identified by her strong feminist and social political concepts that guide her artistic practice, as well as her approach to dealing with these matters. She's had several exhibitions nationally and internationally in institutions such as the Stavanger Kunstmuseum, Malmö Kunsthall, V2 in Rotterdam, and SideQuest Gallery New York. In addition to being an artist, she's also a writer, curator, and art critic for the art magazine Bildende Kunst. In addition to her artistic practice, she has also entered the political scene in Stavanger as a member of the party Rot. She is a candidate in the upcoming national election in Stavanger. She also represents the city of Stavanger's interest in Kunsthall Stavanger. Borge's artistic practice is research-based, and she sees her political engagement as an extension of her artistic practice, where she can dive deeper into the political issues she deals with as an artist. In addition to the residency with Miami at Bas Fisher Invitational, she's currently working on a solo exhibition for Brian Kunstforing and has upcoming residencies in projects in Iceland and New Orleans. And with that, I also want to just give a special thank you to the Fountainhead Residency Program and Catherine Mikesell, because in July we were able to bring Siri, Hanan Benamar, and Marat Anasara to Miami for the month of July. We were supposed to bring Lonnie, Houston, and Misael to Norway in October, but the borders were closed due to COVID protocols, and we've now pushed that forward to May. In lieu of that, we've done some online Zoom talks to lay the foundation of our residency. So this is part of where our talk is a little bit of a work in progress. Let's see. Houston R Cypress is our next artist. Reverend Houston R Cypress is a two-spirit poet, activist, and ordained minister from the Otter Clan of the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida. He resides on the Miccosukee Reservation, located west of Miami, Florida, and he maintains a number of traditional villages located on tree islands scattered throughout Water Conservation Area 3A, the area known as the Historic River Grass and called by his community Kahaya'atleh, which can be translated as shimmering waters. Houston R. Cypress grew up in the swamps of the Florida Everglades, blazing trails through the bush. The endangered beauty of the national environment made such an impression on him during his childhood, being a refuge for his ancestors and the source of traditional plant medicines, that he grew to find ways to articulate strategies for preserving this World Heritage Site. Through his organization, Love the Everglades Movement, Cypress has become a major force within Miccosukee society as an advocate for cultural preservation, environmental protection, business development, and sovereignty. Most recently, Cypress was commissioned by the ICA Miami to present What Endures 2021, a non-binary interfaith travelogue set amidst the landscapes of the greater Everglades. This new video work is part of the museum's digital commission series and can be seen in our booth, P21, in the project section. And then Lonnie Johnson. Lonnie Johnson is an artist, educator, mother, and an activist that understands that as artists, there is a cyclical obligation to give back and nurture our communities, and believes that her creative gift must be utilized to better our world. Born and raised in Miami, she graduated from the New World School of the Arts in 1998 and received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from SUNY Purchase in 2003. She's returned to her alma mater, New World School of the Arts, as an adjunct professor from 2006 to 12. In 2012, she became the prevention coordinator of the A-List Company, a youth arts peer education program funded through Florida's Department of Children and Families. In 2011, Johnson exhibited at Art Africa during Miami Art Week and as part of Slavery to Self-Determination, an exhibit in honor of Black History Month at the University of Miami. She's been featured at the 5th Annual Spoken Soul Festival and in Miami Art Week's Prism Art Fair in 2013 and 14, and at the Anada Art Fair in 2017 in collaboration with Bas Fisher Invitational. So we're so happy to be bringing Lonnie back to NADA again. I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit for Lonnie, because there's so much wonderful things. In 2017, Lonnie became part of the education department at the Perez Art Museum, Miami, as teaching artist and lead coordinator of the Art Detectives program. Art Detectives is an arts education program built on the framework of social justice. And this is something we really had the joy to attend during the residency in July, where Siri and I and Hanan were able to come and observe one of these. And it was really a truly powerful event of bringing together students, police officers, making art together and really talking about care. It was really one of the more incredible things I got to witness, and a testament to how creative and complex Lonnie's practice is. Johnson has been a member of the National Young Arts Foundation since 2010, first as a visual arts discipline coordinator, and since 2016 as a member of the Visual Arts National Selection Panel. In 2019, Lonnie was the recipient of the Knight Foundation's Art Champion Award, and most recently was a recipient of the Oolite Social Justice Award, awarded just a couple weeks ago. So big congratulations, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to just jump into it. So, you know, this is just skimming the surface of how incredible these artists are, and I'm not going into the bios of Hanan, Marit, or Misael since they're not here, but I really encourage everyone to learn more about their practice. Everything about that is written on our website in reference to this program. So what I'm really interested in as well is hearing from you guys about what your experiences are between the difference of the programs. And I thought perhaps it's maybe a good idea to start with you, Siri, since you're the first person in the program to actually spend a prolonged period of time in Miami. How was it?
Well, it was amazing. Seeing that it took place in July with all the COVID, it was quite hard. We had a few challenges there, but I got to meet so many incredible artists and people in the art community in Miami, and I feel that the financial situations of artists and is also something that's gotten so much worse due to COVID, and I experienced that there might be like this little blanket of despair over everyone, and I think that's something that also happens in Norway, but in a bigger degree here. The coming from such a privilege that Norway is with just free healthcare, knowing that if I break my leg, I'm being taken care of. That's not gonna crush my yeah. So that's something I've had to think a lot about after I was here. Just how privileged we are because of the infrastructure in this socialist democratic country that I come from. So, yeah. That's just some of it.
Yeah. That makes me think of a lot of what you're doing in your practice, Lonnie, especially when you use even in your bio, mother as part of this, because I think in America, it's very hard to be a woman and be a mother, and I really appreciate you holding that front and center as part of your artistic practice.
Right. It's not. I did a panel for Commonfield talking specifically about the life of being an artist mother and what that looks like, and it is definitely something that I am curious to see how Norway handles that, because it's like it's either. In these parts where we live, it's either you have to choose. It's be an artist or be a mother. And I really, as a part of my practice, I really focus on kind of dismantling this thought that we have to choose. You know what I mean? Like if there is an art event where I have to drag my 8-year-old to the event, I'm going to do that because I got to show up. But there's this battle of, well, why do I have to do that? And then people looking at you crazy because they're like, why is this little person running around? I'm like, where else is he going to go? Like, his mama's working. So of course he's going to be here. So this idea of like how we have to kind of shift the narrative for, folks that are parents. Thinking about like, I had to really come to terms to Jesus and figure out how I was going to go to Norway for like almost a month and figure out like, well, who's going to take care of my kid? Like, how am I going to pay for childcare? And I love BFI for considering all of those things and kind of thinking about stipends to help us out with that. So we gotta start to begin to think about how this system is structured and really confront and challenge some of these things that we face as artists and as parents. You know what I mean? So it was really interesting to hear that, there is paid leave for, folks that are having children, for the mother and the father in Norway. I was blown away because that, I remember when I was pregnant with my 8-year-old, I was 5 weeks out and my boss is calling me and asking me, when are you coming back to work? So it's just like, wow. So we gotta begin to reimagine what the ecosystem looks like for those of us with children. If I have to show up with the kid, I show up. And I think I think it's important for him as a child to see, when mama is gone, like what is she doing? So it's really a part of my practice too, for him to see what I'm doing. My oldest son is an artist now, and I think that it was really helpful for him to be in company with his mother and her artist friends and kind of be in the ecosystem early because he saw it. So, it's a gift and a curse, but I think my main focus is trying to challenge and reimagine what the ecosystem looks like for artist parents.
That also makes me think of an issue we were coming up against when we were planning to go to Norway in October, when I was talking to Houston, and I'm not sure if I'm getting the number right, but I remember you saying that you needed to get special permission from the tribe to travel internationally because there's only 600 members of the tribe, and every single person is so important and needs such care that you really, to go internationally, you have to make sure that that is something that's okayed. And there were reasons why you might not have been able to travel in October, and hopefully you will be able to travel in May.
Yeah, most definitely. Aside from the serious health concerns that we should all be, that we're all paying attention to in this global pandemic, there are spiritual implications to traveling across such a wide body of water too. You got to get right. You got to get right with the land. You got to get right with the elements before you take such a journey like that. And so that was aside from the health concerns, the spiritual concerns were something that was vital as well. Get the blessing, and parents love you, family loves you, the clan loves you. So that's a community decision. So much of what we do as artists is articulating a point of view. But I think that one of the things that I'm trying to uphold is this communal perspective and the idea of the circle of life that we're all a part of. So those are some of the factors that influence my decision to participate in this program, which I'm super grateful for.
I love that. Get right.
Yeah.
I love that. But it is, and one of the things that I'm thinking about too with, international travels a lot, like, just how, as a Black woman, how do I enter spaces, right? So a lot of the work that I am doing in my creative practice is about that, but it's also like physically, mentally, emotionally about that for me too. So one of the things that I want to kind of engage in and kind of dive into is, what is it like being a Black woman in Norway? You know what I mean? Where are the other folks that look like me? What are their experiences? And kind of connecting with that part of myself as well, because it's like a no-brainer. Like it's a different space. So how am I informing that space, and how am I preparing? Like, how am I getting right to be in that space? You know what I mean? And I'm constantly having to think about, how do I navigate in these spaces? So it's something that it's front facing and something that I think about a lot, but I definitely want to dive in deeper with that because I've had experiences in other European countries that weren't so great as a black woman. So I'm just kind of like, it's almost like I'm getting right and preparing myself to kind of think about how do I claim my space in these spaces, right?
I appreciate those comments, Lonnie, because one of the things that that I explore in the kind of work I create and the kind of communities that I support is the idea of protocol. And so that was something that was really meaningful to me when we had our friends and family now coming here from Norway. I wanted to offer some kind of, or facilitate some kind of connection to the land. And so it was really meaningful for me to take our friends out to the greater Everglades, to the River of Grass, and let that be your first introduction to South Florida. Right. Let the greater Everglades, which provides so much for us here in South Florida, what can we do to give back? And so these are some of the research questions that I was kind of concerned with. What are the notions of reciprocity, especially in such an extractive society these days? And so the minerals that we pull from the ground that either enrich or support our communities, what are we doing to give back to the land? And what are we doing to give back to the communities and support one another? So in terms of protocol, that was something that was meaningful for me. And I hope that y'all feel welcome to come on out and see these places which offer so much to us. It's an open invitation for y'all to visit the greater Everglades. But thank you for sharing about the challenges and the joys of motherhood, because I yearn to hear the sounds of children laughing in places like this. So thank you for what you do.
Right. Thank you.
Well, for people who are local or spending more time here, I encourage you to look into Houston's organization, Love the Everglades. They do so many incredible activities, from cleanups to star walks to protests to so many things to just really foster both connection to the land but advocacy for the land, and especially in terms of water rights and management. Well, maybe a question that I wanted to ask you, Siri, is about artist unions in Norway. In particular, one of the things that just struck me so much, as I mentioned in the beginning, is that part of the reason why there's such a robust arts support in Norway is because artist unions had a very strong presence even before oil was found, but also that continuing now, not just in America with rise of people like Trump, there's also the rise of the right in Norway. There's people who are really pushing to defund the arts in Norway, and it's still an ongoing battle where the unions have to be vigilant and strong. And I would like to hear a little bit of your take about that.
Yeah, that's something that I'm so grateful. Looking back at the unions and how strong they are, in 1882 is the year that we count our unions as being strong. That's when we got our first national exhibition called the Fall Exhibition, which is still going on. And we have grown stronger and stronger and getting more and more members that are lobbying and working so hard for artists' rights in Norway. It's structured the same way as any other union. It is a professional union where you pay each year, and then you have access to a lawyer if you need one. You have access to advice if you need one. You can even get a loan of up to about $1,000 that there's no interests on, and you have 5 years or something before you have to pay it back in case of emergency. And I think that Norway, being such a small country that it is one of the reasons why it's been able to be so strong, because the community is small. It's growing, but it's small. It's also divided into 19 different regions where we have an organization like under an umbrella where we work in our region and in our cities and we do demonstrations, and we show up if there is something the politicians are doing that we don't like, where we're allowed to sit in. We go together and we sit in and we look at them. There's one time I was there, we weren't allowed to say anything, but we were allowed to sit there, and I just remember like using my body language. What is this? Right. Morons. So
but even that, like, think about how differently this thing would be, like this ecosystem here, like if we had like an artist union, like that, it would completely, I mean, you know, it may or may not work, but just the idea that, you know, there is support in place. Like you're saying that, you know, you have a seat at the table to talk to the government, to talk to politicians. Like how powerful would that be if artists could be at the table and talking about policy? Like that shit, I mean, that changes so, for me, that changes so much to have us at the table and discussing policies of how our society is structured. It's incredible to me. Incredible to me.
Yeah, and I think about it so much because part of what I've really strive for with BFI is to incorporate those kinds of things. So just as a note, BFI was the first wage certified organization in Florida and has been a very strong voice in that dialogue as it was forming. We hosted like a talk by A.L. Steiner and Kate Hardy before it was even formed, when it was still like their brainchild. And, you know, we were the first. We're a tiny little artist-run space, but we still gave artist fees commensurate to what our organizational budget was. And other organizations in Florida were like, how did you do that? And I'm just like, how did you not do that? But just, you know, I'm really blown away by the power of being the change you want to see in the world and how that can show other bigger, complex organizations that you just have to do it. And even through what Wage is doing, if you don't know, they have a subdivision called Wagency, which is trying to form an artist union. So it's really interesting to see how other American voices are trying to structure this. But I still think that in a city like Miami that has a very strong cultural affairs department, really incredible activist artists, I feel like there are ways that we can be hyper local about this.
Agreed.
And these are the things that I want to learn from, and I want to try to brainstorm and think through. And I feel like you guys and Misael are some of the strongest local artists here. Misael, who isn't here today, they were the first artist in city life, I'm probably getting it wrong, for the city of Miami Beach. They did a residency within the city of Miami Beach Department of Sustainability and started an organization called the Department of Reflection as a play on a government organization, but to reflect. So, you know, just I'm so intrigued by all of Misael's work, Houston's work, Lonnie's work, and how these sort of plays in government, how these plays on institutions can really turn into real things, real advocacy, real change.
I just want to shoot in that also I used to be active in the board. I was a member of the board of the union in my region, Rogaland. I stepped out of the board and into politics instead, because even though I was sitting at that table at the board of the union, we were also like saying, oh, those politicians, they don't understand anything. They have no clue what they're doing. So I was just like, okay, fine, I'll just become one then. So that's also a way of sort of infiltrating, but also really understanding that bureaucracy, how it is built, and how much I've learned just from doing that. And it's still frustrating.
Yeah, you can't play the game unless you know the rules, right? You know the game book, and then you can flip it on its head. So
yeah, so it's a way of being strategic. And one of the things that Norway, which I've heard since I've been here in Miami, is the grant situation and how we have grants that we apply for, and we are known for it, which is true and amazing. But one of the things that we also do, we have something called kunstneravgiften, which means the artist fee, where if you sell something over $200, you're supposed to pay 5% that the buyer pays, that goes in to this pot of money where you as an artist can apply for. So that's
wait, run that back. Hold on. So, who pays the 5%?
the buyer.
The buyer. So it's kind of like you're taxing the buyer to put it back into the pool for artists to have access to that money. You see what
Correct.
I'm talking about? Like this?
Yeah. So this has led to some really interesting situations. For instance, one of the richest men in Norway, he has this sculpture park, and he bought a sculpture, and they were like, okay, so no, I think actually it wasn't the sculpture, it was the performance of Marina Abramovic. She did a performance called Scream in Norway, and he didn't want to pay the kunstneravgift because it wasn't art. So there's
So he was trying to say a Marina Abramovic performance was not art,
Yeah.
therefore.
Sir,
your
what did you
taxes-
think
Yeah.
it was?
yeah.
What else was it?
An event. I don't know. No. So the definition of what is art and what is not art is also something that comes into play. Also, when transporting art, you are not supposed to pay taxes if you take it over the into Norway, and so this one artist got taxed from for their art, and it's like, no, this is art. I'm not supposed to pay tax. Oh yeah, no, it's a lamp because it glows. And this was like the person in customs deciding that this is, no, it's obviously a lamp. So, so you have to, so the definition of art is also kind of interesting when it's put into this system of finances. Yeah.
Yeah, we were dealing with a little bit of that frustration of how do we define art last week out in the Everglades. One of the Miccosukee artists, a young woman by the name of Kayla Willie, organized a pop-up for us. And there was a couple visitors that came out like, where's the art? Where's the art? But it was all around us. We had a variety of media, a variety of textiles and things, but she couldn't see it. So we dealt with that same condescension or arrogance out there as well. But I think that as we claim and reclaim that space for ourselves, that self-determination that Lonnie is so good at articulating is what is leading us forward. Like, we're here to reclaim the space and rebuild the world. So I appreciate what y'all are doing over there, and that's some of the great things that I've been learning through some of the research that I've been involved in, through the conversations, through the Zoom calls, staying up late, getting up early for these phone calls. But it's been great, like reaching across the ocean and communicating with our friends over there. So thank you for that.
Lonnie, I'm curious to hear a little more about the outreach that you do, especially art detectives. And because we had a really great Zoom meeting with Linda Lemignan, who had a show at the Rogaland Kunstsenter, and their brother David, who is also an artist and just won an award from the city that was chosen by children. So that I really love this sort of play on both how do you have advocacy and education and what you're doing and what you kind of saw and gleaned from that conversation.
I mean, yeah, I thought it was pretty dope that, you know, they allowed the young people to have a panel, them discuss, like, you know, artists, you know, apply, and the young people are the ones that kind of select the artists that they want to receive this award that year. And the artist does these series of workshops and engages with the young people. I thought that was pretty amazing. I enjoy working with young people. I've always worked with young people, even when I was a young person. I feel like I show up for young people the way that I needed somebody to show up for me, especially as young artists. Sometimes these institutions can be brutal. They're hard, especially as brown and black kids sometimes. So I always want to show up for them the way that I needed somebody to show up for me. So as far as just, and it's also about creating accessibility to art for young people. for certain communities, it's not something that is accessible. So I feel like it's my obligation as an artist to kind of be that bridge, the liaison to art, to young folks and communities. So for instance, with the program Art Detectives, what we're doing is we're bringing young people from the community together with law enforcement, City of Miami, Miami-Dade County Police, and we're in conversation with incorporating the Miami-Dade County School Police. First of all, oh, this is streamed, right? Yeah.
No, it's not being streamed. It's being recorded for archival purposes, but not broadcast purposes.
Well, no, I've said this to them. I feel like there is no reason why our school board system has their own branch of police. I feel like we don't need police in our schools. So I am really adamant about incorporating them into the conversation, especially since the young people have such a direct interaction with them on a daily basis. So if we're using art as this way to kind of create this brave space for conversation between the young people and law enforcement, they gotta be a part of this conversation. So it's amazing to kind of have these two dynamics in the same room, and then art be the place where they kind of find the connectivity. Is it easy work? It's not. Because even me as a human, because of the times that we're in and some of the things that have been going on with the dynamics between community and law enforcement, I had to kind of step back because it's like, you know, there was a point where I was like, well, what am I going to talk to them about? Why are we even having these conversations if we're constantly being bombarded with brown and black bodies being shot in the street by them? But I felt like I had to kind of regroup because I have the obligation, right? Like I'm able to be at the table with these people, you know what I mean? So it's my obligation to kind of create this space for these conversations. We've had these conversations. The young people feel empowered to have these conversations and confront law enforcement with all of these questions that they have. So I have to kind of, you know, take myself out of it and understand the magnitude and the power that we have in this program that we're doing. It's amazing to have, you know, even law enforcement say that they had never been to a museum. You know, they had never, you know, made art. So to have them make themselves vulnerable in that space and talk about art and talk to these young people and have these young people feel empowered to do that, it was incredible. So, you know, it's a lot of this about, for me, is about like the accessibility and the community building and kind of setting the tone for folks to have these dialogues that need to be had. And we have to be honest, like the visual language, art is a great way for people to kind of shed these barriers and kind of just be themselves and allow this vulnerability, right?
I just want to thank both of you for letting us Norwegians come and see the Everglades and come and see your program. I have to say it was extremely moving, and when you were just talking about your program, first I almost started, like I had really almost started to cry because it's so powerful. And also I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to a police officer, and I grilled that man.
You did, and I was so happy. I was so happy that you got in his ass because that's, I mean, it's important. You know, they have to be able to handle, they are a part of the community. So we need to be able to critique that.
And for me, it was so surreal seeing, like, coming into a museum, and there's all these beautiful kids running around, playing music, having food, making art, and then you have this police officer who is like gluing, and he's wearing a gun, and he's in full uniform, and I'm like, what is that on your belt? Is that a gun? And he was like, yeah, this is my gun, and this is my handcuffs, and this is my... And he went through the whole thing. And
well, how cute was he?
He was
sitting
so
there,
cute.
Cutting his little fabric, making his little collage, and like you can... And what I enjoyed watching the law enforcement officers make art is that you immediately see them resort back to their childhood. Like, it's like this innocence that kind of like comes immediately there. And I watched him like, so I would talk to him and be like, oh, so you like to cut paper, huh? And he's like, yeah, I like to cut paper. So it's just like, it was just this, like I said, this vulnerability that presented itself through art making that we never would probably get to see this officer on the beat and get that experience from him.
Yeah, and he was so vulnerable as well. He was like, I'm not really good at this.
But it was actually pretty dope. Like, his collage was pretty good.
Yeah. And the conversation that we also had that I got to talk to him about was the Black Lives Matter movement. And that was something he wanted, like, himself started to talk about the police and the police roles in the Black Lives Matter movement. And he was saying, like, and I felt that he was like, it's them, the protesters, and then there's us on the other side. And I was like, but aren't you a part of this community too?
Yep.
So I was like, oh yeah, well, yes, but you know. And I'm like, yeah, no.
And it's interesting because they have to be careful. You know what I mean? We've been doing this program since 2016, and you know, we've had some really close conversations with them. Like, it's sad that they can't be whole humans. Like, they, even outside of uniform, they are the people. Like, they are the police. So it's like, they talked about how even going to the gym or even being at the museum, making themselves vulnerable, sitting on the floor, like all of these things that you don't think of as like a regular civilian, they don't have, it's kind of sad, they don't have an identity outside of that badge. So
that's insane.
It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
You know, and even if they do agree with what is happening in our streets or disagree with, they can never express it. They give us like little side, like little snippets, and we can kind of like, you know what I mean, little sprinkles, but they can't, it's kind of sad, they can't take a stance either way, you know what I mean, until they're retired. So when we've also done sessions with retired Black officers from the city of Miami, one of them being Delrish Moss, who actually was one of the officers that left the city of Miami to go to Ferguson after Mike Brown was killed, but he came back to Miami and he did a workshop with our art detectives kids where he talked about his experience as a Black man and a Black officer. Another woman that we had the honor to do a session with is a retired officer, Miss Anita, who, you know, it's interesting that once they're retired, it's almost like they can unleash and kind of be who they want to be finally. So that was an interesting perspective to have the officers that are still active in the community, but then the officers that have retired talk to the youth and have a conversation about the current dynamics of our communities and law enforcement. So it's been a journey. It's a lot. It is a lot, but we gotta do it. We gotta do it. The only way this thing is gonna shift is if we begin to have these conversations and acknowledgments, right? Like, the moment we can acknowledge what is happening and talking about the history of policing in our country. Like, people don't want to talk about the fact that policing was started to what? To gather slaves, to gather Black bodies. So if we can't acknowledge that that is the part of our history, then how are we going to change the dynamics of what their roles are in our community? You know what I mean? So we talked about that. We talk about that in this program, and I think that once we implemented the history of policing in this program, it completely shifted the game for us. We gotta acknowledge what things started out as. Like, we gotta acknowledge that, and that's the only way we can change it. So I say all that to say it's work, but it's work that has to be done.
I appreciate you bringing up the history of policing and the origins of that in this very difficult time period, because those were some of the multiple histories that me and my co-creators were trying to honor when we were creating this film, Every Step is a Prayer, because in the imagery of the film, you see a variety of beautiful Black bodies running across the landscape, and those images were inspired by the times during the Seminole Wars, the notions of fugitivity, and being embraced by our chosen family. And I think so much of the lessons that are echoing from that time period are things that we can learn from these days, because back then, my ancestors were able to choose and claim formerly enslaved people as family, as tribal members, and create generations together. And so when we were creating this film, we, as a lot of our co-creators were queer, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so we were thinking that that was something that we had to honor as well, because that notion of chosen family is something that is vital to the survival of queer people these days. Right. And so honoring the multiple histories of the land, and finding the joys that we're all struggling for these days too, because as we try to rebuild the world or build the world in a better way, it's for the notions of joy, for the celebration, sharing what we're growing in our garden with each other. So I deeply appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you for that.
And I to you.
Well, even Houston, as Lonnie was talking about the issues she's coming up with in her program, what really was striking me was how powerful storytelling is, and how powerful it is to have small groups sharing their stories. And that made me think a lot about your practice. And when we were talking about things you would like to do in Norway, it was like telling stories, gathering stories, filmmaking, indigenous film. And I just think it's really powerful that the two video pieces we're presenting in the booth on two monitors, we have two films by you on one monitor and one film by Marit, who's also from the indigenous tribe of Norway, the Sápmi people. So I just wanted to just hear your thoughts too on storytelling and how powerful that is, both verbally and in film.
And I'm really indebted to so much of the Sami philosophy when it comes to storytelling, because when we embrace global notions of indigeneity, we can definitely give much respect to the Sami people, because the Indigenous Declaration of Cinema was drafted by the Sami people in the far north. And so when festivals and organizations like Imagine Native in Toronto are putting together film festivals like that, we're indebted to the philosophies of the Sami people and the indigenous people all around the globe. And I think that this idea of the persistence of vision, which is what gives life to the still images, is something that I think about in terms of the storytelling. Because as a Miccosukee person, I have stories to pass on that came down from the beginning of time. And this persistence of vision idea has always been meaningful to me, because like we can kind of feel alone, we can kind of feel located in this space and time, but when these stories pass through us, when the choreographies pass through us, we become a part of that living narrative, we become a part of that circle of life. And so those were some of the things that really inspire me, like diving into and learning about the vibrancy and the dynamism of like Sami cinema. So check it out, dive in, and really look at what the Indigenous Declaration of Cinema is upholding. It's a beautiful manifesto. So amazing.
Yeah, storytelling is important. It's important, and most of our histories is through that. You know what I mean? Like the oratorio, like how we share space through story. You know, I love that. A lot of, like, even with the workshop that I did today, like, it's kind of for selfish reasons, because I collect the stories that happen while people are making this work. You know what I mean? Even though there are people that I know that have participated in these workshops, there are some stories that come up through the art making and through the intimacy of the small groups that I never would have received. You know, it's something about like using your hands and kind of like just being in the moment, making something that, again, makes you vulnerable to kind of share something of yourself. So I love the storytelling. I have people just walk up to me and tell me stories all the time. Like, I don't know what it's about, but the collection of stories and storytelling is a huge part of my practice too. I love it.
And I think it's such a tender expression of like decoloniality these days, because my working definition of that phrase is honoring the values of other systems. And what a great way to do that. Joking, laughing, eating, and weaving it all together, whether it's a blanket, whether it's a basket, or whether it's all these recipes that we can share with one another, a recipe of food or a recipe of plant medicines. So what a beautiful way to honor the values of other systems and celebrate our joys.
Yeah, I have to say, with our exchange, how much I have learned, and how much I think also Hanan and Marit got to learn coming here. I cannot wait for you guys to come to Norway. I'm like, okay, we're gonna eat this, and we're gonna go there, and we're gonna... Because we have so much to learn from each other, and all the conversation that is coming out of this, both emotionally, politically, historically, everything. It's a gold mine for us intellectually, stimuli, I think. So thank you so much.
Can't wait. This idea of like possibilities, right? Like so much can happen, so much will happen, you know?
Well, I just even want to just note, in the spirit of collaboration, this beautiful thing that just happened on the stage. Houston incredibly brought these alligator heads in this box painted with the colors of the Miccosukee flag, put it on the stage, and then making with Lonnie's altar making workshop, added her materials to the stage, and then Siri's like, where's that bottle of aquavit? And added that. So it's like this real offering to the stage, to the people, to the community, and even just this sort of magic that can happen when not just stories come together, but objects that are symbolic and important to one's own art-making practice, to one's culture, to sharing, to this like very well-drunk bottle of aquavit that we will have to finish, because that's also just a really great way to continue the conversation.
Before we hang up,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Naomi, for hosting this talk, for all the work that you and Lee have
Thank you, Lee.
put into this. Yeah, it's so incredible, the work that you have done. Thank you so much for including all of us.
Well, in addition to thanking Lee, who none of this would be possible without, Max, I want to thank you so very much, and Heather and everyone at NADA. What you guys do for the art community, what you do for the larger community, the way you listen and respect, not just that we're not just, you're one of the few organizations that respects that you're not just plopping in on a city, and really have tried to interact and develop, and I really appreciate how much you've supported what we're doing here in Miami. So thank you very much. And maybe a quick question for you, Max. How much longer do we get to keep the altar making workshop out? If people are here in the audience and they haven't had a chance to dabble, is this something that still gets to stay out for a little bit? Oh, great. Okay. Well, let's hang out. Let's have a little akavit.
Nice.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Wonderful.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Sure, Nabi, Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.